Hello, this is Gary Aldridge with LeveragingYOU.com, and try to bring to you various subject matter experts that will help you maximize the value of your business. Today, we've got a special guest in store for you, and this is Art Waskey. And Art is a master sales leader. He's been in sales for decades, and he's special because he's married to my first cousin. And today he's coming to you from Estes Park in Colorado. And we're really excited to have Art Waskey with us today. Art, thank you for joining us.
Gary, my privilege. I wish you could all be up here. Nashville's nice, but I wish you could. I showed you a little view a minute ago of the river in the backyard, but yes, glad to be with you.
Thank you. Art, just I know you, and when we've talked before, I know a little bit about your background and your sales background, but just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them who you are and how you got into sales.
Very good. So I guess what I always say to clients when I'm first meeting a client is, take me from high school. And so, and of course, most of them are LinkedIn, so I have their profiles, but it's always better when I get to hear from them, because there's always some things that they seem to share. So I was raised in Baltimore, Maryland. When I graduated from high school, I left Maryland and went to East Texas, a Christian college, LeveragingYOU University, followed an older brother. Educationally wise, or really academic wise, I had kind of a unique situation. I was dyslexic, so I had problems reading, but I had an exceptional ability in mathematics. Anytime I would take a test, I'd always be in the very highest percentile. So through high school and then entering college, I kind of felt, if some of the audience remember the group The Who, and they had one of their records was Tommy. He was a deaf, dumb, and blind pinball wizard. And I kind of felt that way with the issues that I had with reading and mathematics, but I was able to get into LeveragingYOU on the basis of my math skills. And what I really learned going through college was, if I took the liberal arts course and I had a book to read, if I calculated the number of pages and divided them into what I need to read each night, I could make it through and really did quite well. So I graduated with highest honors in mechanical engineering with welding metallurgy. And when I graduated, I was interviewed by one particular company, and that company picked me out of the whole group, and he said, I want to pay you more than an engineer because I want you to sell. And I kind of looked to my right and left, like I was asking him, are you really talking to me? I just crammed 5 years into 4 to be an engineer, and you want me to sell. Well, the truth of the matter is, I loaded my LTD Ford from East Texas, drove back to Maryland, took a job in New Jersey with an engineering firm for about 1 month. And what I realized was I couldn't sit behind a desk. I was an extrovert. I was a people person. So I went to the engineering manager at the end of the month and told him, this guy's been bugging me from Houston, Texas, and I'm just not happy here. And engineering manager was really upset. He said, you did your job really well, but the other thing that you did is you were able to tease on the older engineers. And I was 22. I thought they were really old. They were probably in their 40s. And you got them to work with the newer skills, and we had more productivity, particularly in the last 2 weeks, with you in the group. So we decided, if you would stay and you continue to perform, in 6 months, we were going to send you for an MBA in industrial management. And I just kind of looked at him and I just said, there's no way that's going to happen. So I loaded my LTD Ford, stopped in Maryland, kissed my parents goodbye. In those days, what you had to go to the local bank to cash your check. He gave me a check, so I got my cash and stopped in Maryland, kissed my parents goodbye. Of course, they thought I was crazy, uh, but you have to know, Gary. The other issue was that your cousin, my wife Sandy, now 50 years, was also in Houston, Texas. So so he was playing that card pretty heavily. So and then I called your uncle from the house. Of course, in those days, we're talking about 1972. There were no smartphones, no cell phones at all. So I called from my parents' house, said, I'm leaving. It's about 2 o'clock. I should be there at 11 o'clock tomorrow, driving straight through, and was able to knock on Sandy's window and shock her. So that started my new life in Houston, Texas, with a company called Airco Welding Products, a national company. Eventually, in 78, they were sold to a British company, British Oxygen Company, and all that really played well for me. We got married, and we were in Arlington, Texas, for 2 years. Had LTD Ford, and I'd call on these Texas distributors. So I had to learn a new language at that time. Again, in the early 70s, I had to learn how to talk Texan. From there, in 2 years, they promoted me, and I went to Houston. Long story, made probably too long with it, but from there, I just progressed through. And at one time, in the last couple years I was with them, I had a quarter of the country and 12 reps. The problem was I was gone all the time. We were in a bank building by the airport, and every week I'd take off, and I was with a different rep from Colorado to Mexico to Florida. And then they reorganized in 1984 and told me that they wanted me to become a vice president. And to be vice president, they wanted me to go out to San Leandro, California for a couple years first, and then I could come back to Houston, where that zone vice president was going to be the national VP. And so Gary, is a tough decision for me at that time. Our kids were 9, 7, and 5. Was doing really well in technical sales, but decided that between my faith in Jesus Christ and the different issues that were required in that international organization, I decided that I'd join a distributor and get off the road to watch my kids grow up. So we moved up here to Denver, Colorado, went to work for an atmospheric gas and welding supply company. And I didn't say that, but that was the background with Airco and BOC. They would have oxygen, nitrogen, argon, helium, hydrogen, those type gases, carbon dioxide, and they primarily would sell to welding distributors. So I left and I joined a second generation distributor, General Air, in Denver, Colorado. General Air was at that time 5 million with just 28 employees. So it kind of felt to start with, golly, like a setback, but we worked together. The owner and I worked together well. And when I left in 18, we were 65 million, had been up to 200 employees, 9 locations. We really grew and grew well. So that's kind of the background. It was with General Air for 34 years. As I said, I retired in 18. And at that point in time, when you are on that kind of pace I was senior vice president, that kind of pace, you don't just retire and stop. So at that point in time, I worked on my LLC, and I do consulting with small independent distributors. I write every week on sales and leadership because I work with the presidents of those companies, and then also do national speaking. So that's a little bit of the background.
That's awesome. I know the sales are sales, but then the sales climate has changed in the last few years. What would you say are some of the primary issues or challenges in the field of sales? Everybody wants to increase sales. Everybody wants to increase revenue. What are some of the challenges you see today that maybe you didn't see 20, 30 years ago?
Well, it's quite interesting because sales would really evolve from, I remember in 1978, I was flown up when I was still with BOC. I was flown up to New Jersey to take a program called POPS, Practice of Professional Selling. It was an IBM program. And the way you sold in those days was you'd get in, you'd do small talk, and you would try to push a product. It was a shotgun approach. If it stuck to the wall, if it stuck to them, then you went on. And then if it stuck at all, you'd start handling objections that they had, and then you had to close. So it was very counter cultural to the company unless they really needed your product. And then what I found in the 80s and 90s, it started to switch, and it became more of a relationship selling. And your job then was to get to know the person that you were selling to and get them to tell you what they needed. And then once you knew what they needed, then you could hone in. And then it moved from there in the 90s into the early 2000s to be more of a consultative sale. But all those were done face to face. With when I left General Air, I had 4 sales managers and 20 salespeople. It was all done with your larger customers and your prospects face to face. And then COVID hit. Well, we were already doing, a lot of people at home were doing FaceTime. But with COVID, when you could not go see your customers, the only way you could interact with them was virtually. So, you know, for me as a consultant at that point, when COVID came in 19 into 20, I started really working with people and teaching them how to use, specifically for me, it was Zoom. So that was one major change. And the other thing that's really changed is the digitalization, the digital transformation. So along with the salesperson no longer going face to face in person and starting to have to use digitalization in Zooming or virtually, the internals of the company started to change too. And Amazon was obviously the one who really initiated that with their interaction with our customers and taking products away. So what we found, and what I do a lot of work with now, is in each company, helping them establish an ERP, a central system. The central system would be like Microsoft and its software, so that everything could talk together. But an ERP in a small business or any business is the central thing that ties the customer to the distributor, to the supplier, and such that the customer can place orders on hand, can place orders online through your website. And what we really find now with the larger customers, 50% of the transactions that occur now are not through any type of media except digital. So they'll go to the website, they'll have their own, what we call order pad, and they'll order. So a major change in the way you operate. The best example I could give is a company called Fastenal. And Fastenal built vendor managed inventory. And what that was is they would go into a customer, and sometimes our customers, and they would put in a machine. The best description would be it looked like a candy machine, but it was a very sophisticated machine, totally digital. So all the products that a customer would buy, whether they were our products or, you know, whether they were toiletry and anything, maintenance, could be put in that system. The beauty for the customer was the customer no longer was really a purchasing department. They became procurement, because Microsoft controlled the inventory. When one product gets to a certain level for reorder, they would come in and bring all the products in the system up to a reorder point, and so they didn't have to come in and use trucking as much. And in addition, the customer could look at the distributor's inventory, they could look at the supplier's inventory, and then the customer's purchases were all available for them to see all the time. So we began to see a major change in the way sales was done. So the outside salesperson now became a person that had to be more than a product. The other thing happened with the millennials that came along. The millennials were brought up on a computer, and so a millennial would already search a product online, find the product, and now the salesperson was about 70% into the cycle, the sales cycle, by the customer before he got involved. So he had to really know the product and the efficiencies of the product and how to use the product. Additionally, he had to begin to work with not just purchasing, but the executive level in a company. And it was all about, how do I help the customer with his customers, not just with my products, but in generally, how do I help him produce more profit and bottom line? And part of it, Gary, was introducing them to the ERP, the central operating system that the distributor is using, showing the customer how to do that, showing the customer digitalization with e-commerce, and then also digitizing products so that they could look not to general internet, but could look to the distributor through his website and see the proliferation of products similar to what you see in Amazon. And it became cost effective, just like the smartphone becoming a smartphone, the cell phone becoming a smartphone, and the cost of these. The last time I went to Verizon, they said, if you sign a contract for 2 years, we'll give you the phone. Can you imagine the dollars involved in the production of the smartphone? Well, the same thing has happened with the digitalization and this digital transformation for anybody that's in sales.
What would you say today, with what you just said, the digitalization in sales and some of the changes with technology and the relationships, what would you say today are like maybe some of the best practices that you see in the area of sales with small business?
Well, it kind of piggybacks off what we were just talking about, and that's to start with the digitalization. The best way an owner and a sales manager can communicate and see that the salesperson is being effective is through a dashboard. And what I mean by a dashboard is you look at 4 or 5 things that every salesperson should be focused on. The problem with many distributors and many companies with an outside sales force is all they say to the salesperson is, well, you did great last year. You grew 15% or 10% or whatever. So, here's our budget for this year. So we need you to grow another 8%. The problem is it's not definitive enough. So what a dashboard does is you look at, well, let's say the growth of the territory that you've already seen, but specific numbers set between the salesperson and the sales manager, and then the profit, the growth in profit, the growth in new business, the number of prospects they're going to see per month, and the number of calls they're going to make. And then another important one is, how many dollars do you have in a funnel? How many new dollars are you working on with your customer base? So that's the first thing. That would be dashboarding, and that should be done every single month. A sit down between the sales manager or the sales officer and the salesperson every single month. we found in General Air when that didn't happen, the growth stopped. So there's got to be a contract between the two so that the salesperson knows exactly in each of those areas what's expected and what he's contracted with the sales manager to do. The other thing is organizational skills. It's totally changed. Okay. You have to be able to use a digital calendar, and there's no cold calls where you go in without a defined call. So what I mean by that, let's say it's a top 10 customer. When you leave that top 10 customer, you describe what you're going to do in the next meeting, and you both open your digital calendar. So for the salesperson, it's the smartphone, and then he looks at the calendar with the customer, and then right away with the email, he sends them an appointment, and then the next month's itinerary is all set. It's not a guessing game in sales anymore. So that's part of it. And then, of course, with digitalization, you better know your products better than you ever did before. And you better understand your customer in a broader sense. You better understand his customer. What makes him grow? What makes that customer tick? And you got to become part of their executive team. And then the other thing that I would just really mention is company culture. I have found so many issues with customers, with my clients, and in general, where the culture's not right. So a person comes because they're attracted to a company. An employee comes. They leave when they, particularly millennials, when they don't see that culture fitting their needs. So they would be the bigger areas I'd really be introducing and suggesting.
Let's talk for a moment about sales compensation. And I know salespeople are, historically paid some portion of what I call fixed compensation, and some of it's variable. I've seen extremes on both sides of the fence where salespeople were literally paid a flat salary and no commission, and not surprisingly, the sales stopped. And then I've seen on the other side 100% compensation being commission, which was my father. I know met him. He was 100% commission, and so he was focused on sales 24/7. So what's a best practice for a mix of fixed and variable compensation? What's the best for the salesperson and best for the employer as well?
Well, with the change through the years that I watched your dad, and we had some great conversations. And he was on the road all the time, and he was selling fixed products, and he was what I would call an independent, total independent operator. He would buy the products, and he would basically resell the products himself. Most companies today hire the employees in sales into their system, and as they work with the salespeople and the sales territory grows, it becomes a real issue. So I'm going to go back to 2000 Y2K. I've been with General Air for 15 years. We were an independent. We competed well with the national and international companies in Front Range, Colorado. But then we went through a recession. Now, here's the issue that you get into. If you're paying incentive on the growth of the business, which is what we were doing. So if they grew it from 0 to 10%, we would bonus them progressively off their base pay. So if their base pay was $1,000 and they hit 10%, they were probably earning an additional 8 to 10%. If they got up to 20%, they could continue to grow. But what happens is in a down year, all of a sudden, they're counting on that incentive. At that point, we were about 80-20. 80% was base pay, 20% was incentive. But now you go into a year when no matter what they do, their account base is not going to buy what it was. So now
Mhm.
their income is cut back to 80%. And so if you don't do something radical in 2001, in the case with General Air, uh, you've got, you have demoralized people out there. And when I
Right.
looked at it, I knew the national companies were doing that. So the president and I, the second generation owner, and I sat down. We said, look, we got good people. We got the best people out there. We've always felt like we wanted to pay their base in general in our company at the 75% level, but give them the ability to earn at least to the 100% if you looked at national numbers. And
Mhm.
now we would have had disincented people. So what we did was we went back to them and we said, we're going to give you across the board a 10% base increase. So now they were at 90%. And we said is what we want to do is pay you incentive on just going out and getting new business.
Mhm.
So everything else that's out there now, whatever happens to your base, you're protected. So they had an opportunity to go get business from our competitors. Our competitors were demoralized. They were coming into their customers and complaining about how they weren't making any money.
Mhm.
And we grew. And we never changed from that. And it's really what I recommend. Each year, you look at how the territory grew. And if the salesperson grew the whole territory really well, you change their base, you increase their base uh, uh, proportionate to how well they did, and then you put them on just new business, the rest of it. So what I'm saying is, they maintained the territory on a salary, and their opportunity was to grow. The other thing that we did throughout the whole corporation, we were open book, and I highly recommend open book. And what that means is, uh, quarterly we would sit down with the whole company and we would show them the revenues, we'd show them the gross margin, we'd show them the cost, and we'd show them the pre-tax, pre-EBITDA net of the business. And we paid the employees 10% of the net. And
Mm.
it's surprising, Gary, is I look at a lot of webinars and webcasts right now, and more, particularly the distribution business, and more of them are doing the same thing. They're open books, they're sharing, and they're
Yeah.
paying their employees on the net of the business. So outside sales, two pieces: the growth of the new accounts that you bring in, not
Mhm.
the growth of existing accounts, because that's where your base is paid, but you pay them on the growth that they get through new business, and then they get a little slice of the net of the business along with everybody else in the company. And that's really what I recommend in incentive.
I've done that. I've worked with a number of clients over the years, specifically in the area of sales compensation. And whenever somebody like me gets involved, initially compensation is a real sensitive issue. People think I'm going to cut the compensation, but what I do is say, we're gonna restructure it where you win and the owners win too, because it's got to be win-win.
Yes.
If people are not motivated when you cut their compensation, strangely enough, they don't like that. But we would put a good mix of fixed compensation or base and incentive compensation, and give them a way up, and then protect them if it's a down market that's outside of their control. I've also put in compensation plans where they get a slice of the profits, and surprise, surprise, the profits grow. That
What?
I had one guy tell me once upon a time. He said, Gary, when you came out with your new compensation plan, I thought you were going to cut my pay, but he said, now I realize that every dollar coming in and every dollar going out affects my wallet. And I said, you got it. That was it. And
Yeah.
then my job was done and everybody won.
Yeah, Gary, you really hit on a main point, and that is when you start paying them on profit, they feel that they have ownership within your
Mm.
company. So regardless of the responsibility in gas distribution, the guy that fills the cylinder, the guy that delivers the gases, the guy in the warehouse, they all feel ownership because they know if they contribute to the bottom line in efficiencies and bring back ideas to improve efficiencies and reduce costs, that they're going to win.
That's right.
It's a tremendous concept that gives the distributor, as you've described it, or the sales company, the business in general, a way to have everybody on the same page.
Art, I could go on and talk with you for a couple hours about sales, but I try to keep these to about 30 minutes so our listeners can listen to the podcast over lunch or while they're driving home or to work in the morning. I'd love to have you back and talk more about sales, because I've got some questions on here that I haven't even gotten to yet. But if you could tell us a couple things. First, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would recommend to a small business owner in the area of sales to help them maximize the value of their business?
Okay, and how much time do we have left?
Just take a few minutes. I'm trying to land the plane here.
Okay, all right, see if I can do it for us.
And then after that, I want you to make sure you give us your contact information so people can contact you directly in case they have questions or need your assistance.
Yeah, okay, thanks. All right, so the first thing that we really hit on when we talked about profits is you have to realize the employees are your greatest asset, okay? If you're nurturing your employees and taking care of them, they will take care of your customers. The second thing, and it relates to that, is your business culture. You need a strong business culture. And what does that mean? Top down, the culture is set by the president and the top 2 or 3 top executives. So they have to be humble. And humility means sometimes owning when you make a mistake and not blaming somebody else. You have to have what I call a humble heart. A second thing, you have to have a culture of, particularly today in the digitalization of businesses, lifelong learning. And again, the owner and the key executives have got to be introducing the latest things to watch online in the distribution business. I can think of 3 different ones, webcasts that I watch every week. They need to be looking at those, and owners need to be looking at the white sheets and passing them down. And then again, just personal accountability is another part of your culture. Okay. You need to have all your employees know that you have their back and that you're personally responsible for not just yourself, but to them. And of course, there's got to be a passion for change, because change is so important today in business more than ever before. And then you can't walk away without talking about virtue. They've got to see in you a person of integrity. And if you fail in integrity, probably of all these, that's the area to pick up the quickest on. And if you're not forthright and truthful, and they're not going to be forthright and truthful. That's just the way it is.
That's right.
And again, realize we're in a digital world, and you've got to be in the digital world.
I love that. Please give us some contact information for you. If somebody wants to contact you directly, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
The best way would really be through my email address. And the business is Impact Speaking Dynamics. So it's Art Waskey, W-A-S-K-E-Y, Art Waskey at the letter I, Speak, S-P-E-A-K-D as in dog.com. And then they can also call me on my cell, 720-341-9405. I'll slow down and repeat it. 720-341-9405. And then also find me on LinkedIn. I have a digital marketer. I produce something in writing every week. And if they would like to get my weekly sales and leadership tips, they're only 300 words long. They can subscribe to that on the website. and website again, just put my name in, it'll trace you to the website. And again, the website will have Impact Speaking Dynamics spelt out. It's the only way I could really get that in there. So that would be, I would say that would be it, Gary. I've written
Okay.
3 books on sales. You'll find those on the
Wow.
website. I'm writing one right now on the 4 disciplines of an organized executive. And it'll be a short book it'll talk about communication, talk about managing information, talk about planning, and then talk about time management. My goal is that somebody should be able to find anything they need to find in an email, in a permanent file, in less than 15 seconds. So I think
That's
that would
awesome.
cover me.
I think that's got it. We'll make sure James, our producer, and my son will make sure he puts all the contact information on the podcast so people can see it. I've actually started writing a book myself, which is kind of scary, more on a personal basis. I can tell you more about that later. We both share the same faith, and it's more faith oriented. So I'm 20 pages in. I'm 20 pages in, and I gotta be more disciplined about getting it out, and I'll do that. And I'm putting it out there to hold myself accountable. You talked about accountability, so yes. I'll get it finished, and I'll send you when I get a draft done. I'll send it to you. Love to get your feedback. Art, love having you on here. I want to have you back again. Appreciate so much you taking your time, and hope to make it out there someday, and introduce you to Linda and James and John, and just we can spend some time together. But thanks so much for coming together with us.
Yeah, thank you, and I look forward to coming back again. Thank you, Gary.